Hi, my name's Eric, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about all of the albums that I've listened to since the last time I told you all of the albums that I listened to in the first half of 2021. At the end of June, I shared everything that I had listened to up until that point in 2021, and that was really fun to make. I love talking about all of the music that I enjoy and don't have a chance to talk about elsewhere on this channel. And last time, many of you said that you appreciated the recommendations I gave you, and I am so excited to do that again today. But before I dive in, let me know in the comments what albums you are enjoying so far this year, whether they be new albums or old classics. Check the description for links to lists of nonprofits you can donate to. Please subscribe to be here when I post new videos. I have new reactions coming soon, and hit the bell icon to be notified when my videos go live. Without further ado, I'm going to start with new releases and then talk about some pre-2021 albums that I listened to. The first album that I listened to after my last listening report video came out was Mood Valiant by Hiatus Kaiyote. This is a neo-soul album with some psychedelic influences. This album is chill and laid back and very artsy, and the lead vocals are really impressive. If you can only check out a couple tracks, I would recommend Stone or Lavender and Red Room. Next, I listened to Home Video by Lucy Dacus. If you didn't know, Lucy Dacus is one of the 3 members of Boy Genius along with Phoebe Bridgers and Julian Baker. I first heard of her when she released her album Historians and the song Night Shift, which was very widely acclaimed, and this album is excellent. I really enjoy her songwriting and her lyrics. They're very nostalgic and warm. There's also some nice shifts in the pace of this album between songs that are more upbeat like Hot and Heavy or Brando, and then songs that are more somber as you might expect from this type of indie rock, indie folk album, especially the song Thumbs, which is one of my favorites, if not my favorite on the album. Of course, if you like artists like Phoebe Bridgers, you will really enjoy this album and I highly recommend it. Next was an album that I actually got a few comments about, and that is The Turning Wheel by Spelling. I really enjoyed Spelling's last album and this one is totally different. In the past, her work has been more minimal synth oriented, whereas this is a full-on chamber art pop album, and it is so impressive and so ambitious. I absolutely love the songs Little Dear and Always. There are some more soul influences on this album that make it feel a bit more organic. I've seen the Kate Bush comparisons swirling around this album, and I do think they're warranted on the basis of this album's creativity and quality, but really it just sounds like nothing else you'll listen to this year. It's baroque and whimsical and fantastical and just a fantastic album. Next, I listened to Boy from Michigan by John Grant. This album I think is actually pretty underrated. I mentioned before that Spelling in the past has made minimal synth, and this album is a minimal synth album, except instead of having that sort of sterility that you would associate with the genre, it's very confessional and open. Vocally, John Grant's delivery is bassy and almost deadpan, and his lyrics are vivid in their imagery and anecdotes, but also include a lot of sort of whimsical turns of phrase. Again, it's an odd but very emotional album, so if that sounds like your thing, give this one a shot. Next was I Know I'm Funny Haha by Faye Webster. This is sort of a singer-songwriter alt-country album. It's often very serene. Faye Webster's vocals remind me a lot of Natalie Prass's vocals. There's a soft, sensitive cooing quality to her voice that I think works really well with the lyrics. Her songs are often lovelorn and introspective, and they have almost a serene sadness about them that I really enjoy. So for me, it's definitely another standout this year. Next, I listened to Our Extended Play by Biba Doobie. This is reminiscent of a lot of 90s and early 2000s pop rock. I actually love every song on this EP, and I find myself listening to them very often. They're nostalgic and catchy and dreamy and intimate. I can totally imagine these songs being played on the radio in my early childhood, so the nostalgia factor is just through the roof for me. Next was Deadpan Love by Cautious Clay. This is an alternative R&B album with some neo-soul influences. The vocals on this album are so warm and light, and the songs Wildfire and Shook are 2 of my favorites. Shook in particular is such an earworm. I find myself listening to it and having it stuck in my head all the time. At the beginning of July, I listened to Get Up Sequences Part 1 by the Go Team. This album is just so much fun. If you haven't heard of the Go Team, they've been around for quite a while. Their style of music can be described as plunderphonics. They take a lot of samples from many different genres, from Motown to Bollywood to hip-hop. This album is such a wonderful burst of positive energy. There's a lot of horns and a lot of very classic 80s style rapping. If you want music that'll put a smile on your face, definitely definitely give this album a try, and if you enjoy it, also check out their extensive back catalog. Next, I listened to Pink Noise by Laura Mvula. This album is very different from her prior album, The Dreaming Room, with this one leaning more towards 80s synth pop, but what anchors both albums is Laura Mvula's incredible voice. So expect a lot of very impressive vocal acrobatics, and if you enjoy that, also check out her song Overcome from a few years ago, which is my favorite song of hers. Next was Last Year Was Weird Volume 3 by Tkay Maidza. I believe that's how you pronounce her name, but this is the third in a series of 3 pop rap EPs, this one with even more slow jam R&B influences. I think of the 3, this one is a little bit less punchy, but it goes in more different experimental directions. So if you enjoy really poppy rap or different hip-hop genre fusions, I think you'll really enjoy this one as well. Next, I listened to an album that many people have been talking about, Inside by Burnham. This album, actually, I might have heard almost in full on TikTok before I heard it on the actual album. I haven't seen the special, so if you think I should watch it, let me know. Basically, the idea of this album is it's a year inside during the situation in the world that we are currently still dealing with and all of the overwhelming anxieties that came along with that, with Bo sort of reflecting on himself personally and the politics of the world around him, and I guess sort of his inefficacy with that. Feelings of powerlessness and self-doubt delivered with, of course, a sense of humor. There are so many great songs on this album. Because I like sad music, I really enjoy the sadder moments on this album, like All Eyes on Me and That Funny Feeling. But possibly one of the best things to come out of this album was the mashup of Bezos 1 with Gimme 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 by ABBA. If you haven't heard it yet, it's on YouTube and it slaps so hard. It's obviously also super quotable and universal and relatable, hence the millions of memes and TikToks that have been made of this album. And seeing as we are approaching the fall, it's the perfect time to bring out your latte foam art, tiny pumpkins, and fuzzy comfy socks. Next, I listened to Call Me If You Get Lost by Tyler, the Creator. This album is just so full force and ferocious that it grabbed me right away. It's impressive technically, and even though it's less poppy than an album like Igor, it is just as enthralling. Next was another album that I actually got some comments about, Mythopoetics by Halfwave. This is another really solid art pop album. Party's Over, I think, is my favorite song on the album, but this is very much art pop through the lens of a young adult life. It's arty and off-kilter while still being very universal and relatable. So if you love art pop as a genre as much as I do, then definitely give this one a listen. Next was an album that really surprised me, Sling by Clairo. Clairo's debut album, Immunity, was produced by Rostam of Vampire Weekend, and so it was a bit more indie pop leaning and it had a lot more electronic elements. This album was produced by Jack Antonoff and leans more in a 70s folk direction, and it is so serene and beautiful. The melodies are just gorgeous on this album. I love the songs Blouse and Wade and Harbor and Bambi. It's also great that some of the strongest tracks are around the middle of the album because I sort of began to get into the groove of the album and then I was just blown away by its middle stretch. I am so impressed and I think I like this even more than Immunity. And I do enjoy Clairo's poppier work a lot as well. The song Closer to You, I believe, was my most played song of 2019, but the world of this album is so cohesive and it feels really just like a big warm hug. And moving in a very different, harsher direction, we have got an EP, The Asymptotical World by Yves Tumor. I know a lot of people who liked Yves Tumor's more experimental work found this one to be a bit more mainstream and accessible, but I think that might be why I enjoyed it even more. I love the songs Jackie and Loyalty is a Nuisance Child. They've just been on repeat for me. The noise rock sound of this EP just works so well for me. It's very grungy and dark, and I will definitely have to go back and listen to their other work because this EP impressed me so much. And in that same vein of edgy but accessible rock music, let's talk about Lately I Feel Everything by Willow. This is easily my favorite music that Willow has put out. It is so catchy. The punk pop influences are just perfection. Transparent Soul featuring Travis Barker has been on repeat for me every single week since this album came out. If that song and Good For You by Olivia Rodrigo help usher in a pop punk revival, then I think I will really enjoy that. Admittedly, I never had a pop punk phase even though I lived through that era. That was like middle school for me, I think. So maybe I'm a bit of a poser, but I did get this shirt at Hot Topic. So swinging back towards the warmth of Sling, we've got another EP, Scout by Samia. The song As You Are is so comforting. It's such a great song for anyone who's dealing with feelings of self-doubt. And this is another EP like the Biba Doobie EP where I really do love every song. And that includes the final song on this EP, which is a cover of The Promise by When in Rome, which is a song that I really love a lot. I listen to oldies radio, as I have mentioned in the past. My apologies to anyone who grew up in the 80s, but that's an 80s song that I really enjoy. So this EP is a combination of some really great original indie folk material, as well as some fun indie pop. Next, I listened to Thirstier by Torres. If you didn't know, Torres released an album last year called Silver Tongue, which was one of my favorite albums of the year, and I've actually found myself enjoying even more since it came out, and this album is an amazing follow-up. Thirstier, the title track of this album, is easily my favorite rock song of the year so far. It is an absolute blast of stadium rock. It is so passionate and incredible. I can listen to it a million times in a row, and this album is actually very sonically diverse. As you can tell, I'm very enthusiastic about this album, and I highly recommend it. Next was an album that I've already talked about, so I'll just mention it briefly, Happier Than Ever by Billie Eilish. This is another album like Sling that I think is the exact opposite of a sophomore slump. Billie and Clairo really did not come to play with their sophomore albums. This is a fantastic album. I find myself enjoying a different song every week. That to me is a sign of a great album, when all the time you're just cycling through and developing a different relationship with every track. And if you'd like to know how I would rank all of the songs on Happier Than Ever, then I have already made a video for that. Next, I wanted to mention the EP Crowlink by Shirley Collins. This is mostly more ambient reworks of her past music. If you didn't know, Shirley Collins has been active making music since the late 1950s. She is an English folk musician, and this album takes those songs that feel very rooted in the past and pushes them into the future, and it's just gorgeous. Next, I listened to Animal by Lump. If you didn't know, Lump is a band made up of Laura Marling and Mark Lindsay, and this album is very odd. It's sort of indie rock and art pop. Laura Marling is more known for her singer-songwriter folk music, so her vocals feel very close and intimate, which is a very interesting approach for an album that's a bit poppier and more ominous. Also, whereas her music, at least of late, has been more about family, this album also focuses on themes of celebrity and music making. So while it is very different from Laura Marling's other output, if you enjoy it, I would check this out as well, because it is a very interesting album and very strong. Next, I listened to Stand For Myself by Yola. The songs Dancing Away in Tears and Starlight are absolutely gorgeous, but the main attraction here, of course, is Yola's amazing vocals. She's a powerhouse vocalist, so if you want to hear some great vocals, check this album out. And moving from something sumptuous and glittery to something cold and scary, let's talk about Sinner Get Ready by Lingua Ignota. This album was such an event online that even though I wasn't totally sure if it would be up my alley, I gave it a shot. I did see what genres it was though. Dark wave, neoclassical dark wave, as well as drone and liturgical music, and that all seems like a good time. I think that was something that I thought would be fun, and I don't know if fun is the right word for this album, but it definitely is fantastic. It also, like I said, is often very scary and stark. It feels very much like the atmosphere of the movie The Witch, simply because it comes from that same sort of puritanical mindset. I think two of my favorite tracks are the opener and closer, in particular, The Solitary Brethren of Ephrata. It's a more traditional religious song, and I have a background in classical and liturgical music, so that really just was more straightforwardly beautiful to me. This album is such an emotional journey as well. A lot of it is structured in a sort of drone-like way, where it's this wide open landscape of music that's dotted by these moments of intensity and beauty. The more I think about this album, the more I appreciate it, and I truly get the hype. This album is excellent. Next, I listened to two albums that I've already talked about, 333 by Tinashe and Solar Power by Lorde. From 333, I find myself returning to Pasadena all the time, and from Solar Power, I am really having a moment with Mood Ring. I'm listening to it all the time. It is just so beautiful, and I love the video that Lorde made on Genius's YouTube channel. Lorde's way of thinking about lyrics, I think, actually resonates a lot with me. She, like me, thinks in a very physical, gestural way when it comes to lyrics, and I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate how much thought she put into every word. Then I listened to Love Will Be Reborn by Martha Wainwright. This album leans more in the alt-country direction than her past music, which was more singer-songwriter and piano focused. If you didn't know, Martha Wainwright comes from a very musical family. Her brother is Rufus Wainwright. Her music in the past has been very harsh and very hard on herself in particular, but this album focuses more on family and is a bit more naturalistic, and I think that's really refreshing to hear, and her vocals on this album are just, oh my gosh, amazing. The songs Middle of the Lake and Getting Older are songs that I return to a lot, possibly mostly for her vocals because she has such great control. Even though it sounds like she is so wild and unbridled, it is just so masterful. And speaking of great vocals, let's talk about Year of the Spider by Shannon and the Clams. I have loved their song Backstreets for years now. This album is sort of garage rock and psychedelic rock and surf rock. This band has been around for years, and the lead vocalist is just amazing. Getting a bit more recent here, I have The Ballad of Dude and Juanita by Sturgill Simpson. This is, I think, my second favorite Sturgill Simpson album after A Sailor's Guide to Earth. This is a concept album, it's outlaw country, and it surrounds basically a man and his horse, and his dog, can't forget the dog. While it's not quite as alt country as A Sailor's Guide to Earth and doesn't have those moments of tenderness quite as much, I love that this album has a narrative. It is so charming. I really was so impressed by it. But I guess if you're a little bit hesitant about country, this might not be your best entry point. This might be a good entry point for like classic country or outlaw country artists like Johnny Cash, but if you want something a little bit more accessible, if you like pop or rock, then I would start with A Sailor's Guide to Earth. Next, I listened to Screen Violence by Chvrches. This is such a return to form for them. I really enjoy this album. There are so many amazing hooks on this album, a lot of songs that I find myself returning to. Thematically, this album is very influenced by feminism and horror movie tropes. This is probably Chvrches' darkest album yet, but it features some of Lauren Mayberry's best vocals, as well as a guest appearance by Robert Smith of The Cure. After that, I listened to If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power by Halsey. As you know, I reacted to Manic when it came out a couple years ago, and I think this album is such an improvement. I liked Manic, and I also really enjoyed Halsey's poetry collection, but this album is some of Halsey's best writing. The song Bells in Santa Fe in particular is my favorite. The album was produced by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross of Nine Inch Nails, so I do think it could have gone a little bit weirder, a little bit noisier, a little bit more industrial and aggressive, but that said, I think this album was a great change of direction for Halsey, and if Halsey continues in this darker, more thematically complex and rock-influenced direction, I'm very, very excited to see what comes next. After that, I listened to Glow On by Turnstile. This is a pop rock album, but it's also influenced by dream pop, so it alternates between feeling very aggressive and feeling very light and airy. It also features Dev Hynes of Blood Orange on a few songs, and I am a big Blood Orange fan, as you might know, so that definitely drew me in too. This album is so catchy and so much fun and so energetic. If you enjoy Jeff Rosenstock or any post-hardcore music, I think you'll really enjoy this album. Another really great album that I listened to is Sometimes I Might Be Introvert by Lil Sims. It just came out last week, I believe, and it is so ambitious and grand in scope. Structurally, it's very reminiscent of albums like To Pimp a Butterfly or The Arcandroid, and it announces its greatness and its ambitions at the door. Thematically, it does what you expect it to do, but sonically, it goes off in so many different directions. There's a lot of soul influences that make this album extra beautiful. This album is larger than life, but still very life-affirming, and I highly recommend it. Next, I listened to Dawn of Chromatica, the Lady Gaga Chromatica remix album. I was so excited to hear that this album really is an extension of the Charli XCX universe. There are so many artists who are in her circle that appear on this album. I mean, just off the top of my head, we've got, of course, Charli XCX and A.G. Cook, as well as Dorian Electra, Pablo Vittar, Ash Nico, and Shy Girl. Oh, and Rina Sawayama and Clarence Clarity. But I think my favorite remix on the album, at least at the moment, is the Arca remix of Rain On Me, because weirdly enough, the way that she mashed up Rain On Me with her song Time actually captures the vibe of the lyrics even more strongly. The remixes as an album in general, though, are very chaotic, so enter with an open mind. Next, I listened to Any Shape You Take by Indigo D'Souza. This is a very thematically cohesive and impressive indie rock album with very sensitive and introspective lyrics and strong vocals. But I think what impressed me most about this album is just how emotionally insightful the lyrics are. And I listened to the EP Fragments by Keaton Henson. This is a companion to his album Monument from last year. That album was one of my favorites of the year. If you like slowcore or singer-songwriter or indie folk or chamber folk, this EP will be right up your alley. There's an amazing song Marionette featuring Julian Baker, who also is in the indie folk and slowcore world. These songs are quietly devastating, so if you enjoyed this EP, definitely check out the album Monument as well. And briefly, before I move on, I just wanted to mention 2 more albums that came out recently. First, How Long Do You Think It's Gonna Last by Big Red Machine, aka Justin Vernon of Bon Iver and Aaron Dessner of The National, as well as Heartbeats or Heartbreaks by Clairo, the lead vocalist of Planet 1999. That is a PC music release, which is very exciting. For both of these albums, I would say if you enjoy these artists' output in the past, give these albums a listen. With the Big Red Machine album, it features a lot of very exciting artists like Taylor Swift, Anais Mitchell, aka the creator of Hadestown, and Sharon Van Etten. And the Clairo album is a more dreamy, ambient approach to hyperpop. And both of these albums have a lot of moments of beauty. Finally, I'm going to talk about all of the pre-2021 albums that I listened to recently. I've been revisiting a lot of Tori Amos and Madonna albums, but most importantly for this video, I listened to all of ABBA's back catalog for the first time. In my last video, I mentioned Arrival, and I had already listened to Voulez-Vous, and since then I listened to all of the rest of their albums. I think after their new album comes out, which I'm so excited about, I'm going to have to make a video ranking all of their albums. I will listen to all of them again, sort of solidify my thoughts, but I think I have some hot takes in there. I really do enjoy all of them though, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, let me know in the comments what music you've been listening to and what other new for 2021 releases you would recommend. Check the description for those donation links. Please subscribe to be here when I post new videos. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you are staying safe and healthy, and until next time, that's it.